we'd love to just know who you are and just thank you for being here with us today. We're starting a brand new series today called Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. We've all made some decisions probably that later on we were like, man, I wish I hadn't made that choice, and we became to regret it later. So I hope you'll really lean into the message and this series as we learn to ask some questions that will hopefully help us make better decisions. And stick around to the end of this video so that you can learn how you can even go further in this message series. We got a lot of awesome things going on here at Pinnacle. And one of those things we're really excited about is in a couple of weeks, we're going to be having a kids camp and family experience for one day. October the 16th and 17th is Haywood County Schools fall break weekend. And so the 16th, that's Sunday night, we're going to be having a family experience here together. And then if you've got kids that Monday, we're going to have an all-day kids camp here that Monday as the kids are out of school. And it is going to be an awesome day for your kids to come and hang out and have just a great experience. And so if you would like to register your kids for that, you can do that online. Go to pinnacle.church or download the Pinnacle Church app and you can sign up there as well. All right, we're going to sing a song together right now, so I'm going to turn it over to Tommy and our worship band, and then I really hope you'll lean into the message here today.
Maybe midnight or midday, never early, never late. He gon' stand by what he claimed. I lived enough life to say, I heard your heart, I see your pain. Out in the dark, out in the rain. For so long, feel so afraid. I heard you pray in Jesus' name. And maybe midnight or midday, it's never early, never late. He gon' stand by what he claimed. I lived enough life to say, help is on the way. Round in the corner, help is on the way. Coming for you, help is on the way. Yeah, I lived enough life to say, help is on the way. Sometimes it's days, sometimes it's years. Some face a lifetime of falling tears. He's in the darkness, he's in the cold. Just like the morning, he always shows. And maybe midnight or midday, never early, never late. He'll stand by what he claimed. I live a long life to say, help is on the way. Around in the corner, help is on the way. Coming for you, help is on the way. Yeah, I live enough life to say, help is on the way. Said I see my share of troubles, but the Lord ain't failed me yet. So I'm holding on to the promise, y'all, that He's rolling up His sleeves again. I said I see my share of troubles, but the Lord ain't failed me yet. So keep holding on to the promise, y'all, that He's rolling up His sleeves again. Don't you know it? I see him rolling. Help is coming. Yeah, maybe midnight or midday. It's never early, never late. Oh, he gon' stand by what he claimed. A little enough life to say. Maybe midnight or midday. It's never early, never late. He gon' stand by what he claimed. A little enough life to say, help is on the way. Help is on the way. Around in the corner, help is on the way.
Hey there, and welcome to another online experience here at Pinnacle Church. We're starting a new series today based on a book that Andy Stanley wrote called Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets, because I think we've all made decisions in our life that on the backside we have regretted. And some of those compound, and maybe we made a lot of decisions and we have a lot of regrets, or some of us are like, well, I've got a few regrets. But the point is, we've all done this, and I think we could all agree, every one of us, that we want to make better decisions in our life. Matter of fact, Andy Stanley has a great quote about that, because why are good choices, good decisions? Why are they so important? And here's why. He has a great quote. He says, your decisions determine the direction and quality of your life. That is so true. We have to understand that our decisions are kind of like the GPS of our life. They set the direction of where we're headed in life, and they always are going to determine the quality of our life. I mean, I think back to a decision that we made, a bad purchase that me and my wife made. It's been about a decade ago. We were in a market for a new car, new to us. We only buy used cars. But we went to the car lot. We were looking at used cars. She was wanting like a small SUV, and I was looking at, Escapes or Explorers. I even looked at a Jeep, and I've not gotten a Jeep yet. But she goes over and she's like, look at this. This is a Land Rover. I'm like, babe, we can't afford no Land Rover. What are you being bougie? We can't afford no Land Rover. She's like, what's a small Land Rover? It's called a Freelander. And I'm like, okay. And we looked, the price, we're like, oh, wow, this is comparable to what we want. And she's like, oh, and we went and we did a test drive on it, and it drove really well. Problem was, we didn't ask enough questions. We didn't do enough research on the old Land Rover Freelander. Come to find out, if you have one of those, maybe you have and you know this, every one that's ever been made in the history of the world, they don't make those anymore, by the way. They explode. Their engine, the seals break, every one of them break at around 40 to 50,000 miles, every single one of them. And we didn't know that. We change our oil regularly like we're supposed to. She calls me up one day and is like, my car just stopped. Come to find out, the engine had blown. And we were 2,000 miles over the warranty. They wouldn't warranty the Land Rover. So here I was stuck with this piece of junk, all right? By the way, I will never drive one of those, even if I got the money to, car, because we didn't ask enough questions and do enough research. And that's what we're going to learn over the next few weeks, is we're going to learn how to ask better questions, because in asking better questions, we make better decisions. What we're going to do is we're going to look at 5 questions. Today's an intro. We're going to get into those 5 questions starting next week. 5 questions that we need to be asking of ourselves so that we will make better decisions and so that we will have fewer regrets. Because here's the thing, the more questions you ask, the greater insight that we have, and the more insight we have into a problem, into a decision, I think we set ourselves up to make better decisions. But here's the thing, when we talk about that word insight, how do we get better insight? We get better insight from our questions, but there's a few ingredients, there's some things. We kind of got to set ourselves up. There's 2 things that happen in our life that we need to kind of cultivate to set ourselves up to ask better questions. And here's what I believe. I want you to maybe write this down, take a note, whatever, take a screenshot if you want. And it's this, it's that insight is found at the crossroads of curiosity and diligence. I believe that if you are really going to gain insight about something, and if you're going to ask good questions, you have to cultivate curiosity and you have to be diligent. As a matter of fact, I think that those are actually biblical Christian principles. And we're going to look at why that is. First off, let's talk about curiosity. You know, we have this idea in Christian circles, I think sometimes as we grow into adults, that we think we have that old saying, curiosity killed the cat. You shouldn't be curious. You can be too curious. You can be too inquisitive. You just need to stay within certain boundaries because curiosity is dangerous. But that's the farthest thing from the truth, because Barnabas Piper, in a book called The Case of the Curious Christian, he says that curiosity is something God has given us that, yeah, we can use sinfully, but we also can use in a way that helps us to understand more about the world we live in, understand more about ourselves, and ultimately, the great gift of curiosity is we learn more about God. And as we learn more about God, of course, we learn more about how to live out the will of God. And I think we learn more about ourselves and learn more about God through our curiosity. We will make better decisions. And curious people ask the best questions. You say, well, how do you know that's biblical? Well, let me give you a proverb. Of course, proverbs are wisdom sayings in the Bible that were written. They're principles to help guide our life. They're not necessarily promises, but they are principles. And listen to Proverbs 25:2. Listen to what the writer of Proverbs says here. He says, It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings. Now, what in the world does that, I mean, it sounds pithy, but what does it mean? Well, the first half says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It means God is God, and he, of course, is all-knowing, all-knowledgeable, and there are certain ways, God has said, my ways are higher than your ways. There are certain things that God conceals. There are certain ways that God works that can be mysterious to us. But then there are other things. Look, he says here, but it's also to search a matter out is the glory of kings. And what he means by that is he's speaking of the king. It's the king's role to discern, to discover truth. Now, there's a principle there. It's the principle of curiosity. I read a great article by a guy named John Bloom the other day on Desiring God, and he said, we have to understand that sometimes God is more concerned with our from giving us transformation than information. And what do you mean by that? What he meant by that was that sometimes God allows us to be in a place where we have to take the time to learn, to study, to be curious. We don't just automatically come to insight about certain things, about the character of God, the nature of God, the kingdom of God, or even life in general. Maybe you're not yet a Christian yet, and you got to understand that curiosity is a way that you learn more and more about the world and yourself. And sometimes the things, the insights we get are not just automatically given. It's kind of like we have to dig for them. And so if you're going to ask better questions or ask good questions of yourself that will help you to make better decisions as we look at these 5 questions later on, one thing you need to cultivate in your life is childlike curiosity. Now, Popper would say, you got to understand there's a difference in being childish and being childlike. Jesus, who asked, was the best question asker. Go and read in the Gospels, okay? If you go read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the stories about Jesus, the history of his life, he was the best question asker. There was a curiosity about him. I'm going to say, well, he was God, but he asked questions. He used questions to get people to think about themselves. He asked questions to learn about people. He was the best question asker. And Jesus himself would make a statement. He would say that to enter the kingdom, to enter into a relationship with God, you have to have a childlike faith. And there's a difference in childishness. We put away immature childishness, but childlike faith, children are so inquisitive. And for some reason, we become adults and we lose that curiosity and we lose the ability sometimes to ask questions. Think about a child. They hit that phase. If you're a parent, you know this. What do children, they're asking that question, why? Why? Well, this is why. Why? Why? Why is it that way, Daddy? Because why? 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 They're like toddlers and seagulls. They're the same, why? But it's a trait that we need to cultivate as adults, to stay curious about the world we're in. We're willing to put ourselves even and learn things in situations where maybe we're challenged, because it's in those challenges that we grow. And when it comes to the personal, making better decisions in our life, I think curiosity goes a long way to asking those questions. Albert Einstein has a great quote. He said this. Albert Einstein, who, of course, was one of the most brilliant people of the last century, would say this. He said, I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious. I love that. It's kind of funny to me that one of the most brilliant, smartest people ever, he came up with the theory of relativity. We know a lot about the atom because of this guy. He would say, I don't got no special talent. I'm not that bright. He says, I'm just passionately curious. There's a principle there he's saying is he had the curiosity to look into things, to try to learn things about the world. And I think if we are going to make better decisions in our life, and as Christians, of course, the decisions we make, we want to honor God with our life because that's the center and substance of our life. We're in a relationship with him. We have to be curious, passionately curious. And so that's why I say that insight's found at the crossroads of curiosity and diligence, but there is also this other ingredient, not just being curious, but it's also this idea of diligence. And think about what that word means. To be diligent means that you're thorough with something. It means you take the time to work something out. And you've got to understand, if you and I are going to make good choices in our life, if we're going to ask good questions that lead to good choices, we have to be diligent also in that process and understand sometimes let me rephrase that. All the time, most of the time, good decisions take time sometimes. Yeah, there are those split, thin slicing decisions where we on the fly make a decision and it turns out okay. Sometimes you have to do that in life. But a lot of the times, the regrets we have, I know for me, the regrets I have, some of my biggest regrets with in my professional life, in my personal life, are because I rushed a decision. I didn't take the time to ask enough questions. I didn't take enough time to think about the answers to those questions. I just wasn't diligent enough. And that's a principle, man. In Proverbs, he says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Now think about what he's saying there. He's saying when a diligent person is going to take the time to ask the right questions, they're going to take the time to weigh the different sides of an object. A diligent person understands that life is connected. A diligent person understands that quote from Andy, that our decisions affect the direction we're going in, that our decisions, a poor decision can affect the quality of our life. And so they are going to be diligent in the plans that they make. They're going to look at every angle. They're going to take the time. And then when it's time to make it, there's also the flip side. You can be crippled making decisions and never make a decision. That's not good. But when the time is right, when they've done the best they can, because you're not always going to have 100% information about a decision. There's always risk and stuff. And you got to be willing to take risk in life, because it's in risk that sometimes we get great reward. But the point is, he says that in being diligent, their plans lead to profit. Now, he's using a business example here, but I think we can also say that being diligent leads to profit in the sense of we profit in our life, that goodness comes in our life. We don't make decisions and have regrets. But look what he says here about being hasty. He says that surely, he's saying there's a principle. He's saying surely, that this is a given. Haste leads to poverty. Of course, it's an economic term there. You can think about people who've been hasty and made unwise financial decisions and boom and bust of economic times and markets and fads and things and being hasty. Here's the next greatest thing and this new fad, and those things normally don't turn out well, and then I've lost everything I have. Think about people who made bad business decisions like that. Or in my case, I was hasty buying a car, and then that thing ended up blowing up, and we had to deal with this piece of junk car, okay? But there can also be a poverty of soul. There can also be a poverty of relationship. There can be a poverty in just living your life that's not economic, but it's a poverty of joy, a poverty of substance, because we've hastily entered into a relationship we didn't think about. We've hastily chose a path that we didn't really research or think about. We hastily chose something because sometimes we ask the wrong questions. In our haste, we'll ask these two questions. Does it make me happy? And does it feel good? Those are not always the best two questions to ask, because sometimes we can deceive ourselves and we're not willing to listen to hard truths. And we think something will make us happy that on the backside makes us miserable. Or it may feel good in the moment, but later on, it doesn't deliver what we thought. And so that's something I want you to understand. See, not only are we diligent and we're willing to take the time, but diligent people are also willing, as they take the time and truth comes to light, we're also willing to hear hard truths. See, that's the problem. We often are not willing to ask ourselves hard questions because we don't want to hear the answer. We get defensive when people ask us questions because we get defensive in that, not because necessarily that they're just asking a question, because we feel we're being questioned. Andy says that in his book. But the thing is, oftentimes it's not that we are being questioned, it's just that we're being asked a question. And then we don't want to ask ourselves questions because we're afraid of the answer sometimes. Because we know if we're really honest with ourselves, that's going to be one of the first questions next week. We know if we're honest with ourselves, we probably shouldn't make this decision. There's a good proverb about that. Proverbs 15:32. The writer of Proverbs says this. He says, if you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. He's saying there, hey, you reject discipline. Another way of that is another way you could say, hey, if you reject constructive criticism from others or even yourself, if you're not willing to ask hard questions, if you're not willing to hear the answers that you don't want to hear, he's saying there, you are only harming yourself. But if you're willing, okay, to listen to things that you maybe don't want to hear, if you're willing to ask questions that are going to give you answers that you're afraid to hear the answer of, but they're for your good, even though they're hard, he says you actually will grow. That's where growth comes in. So you see, that's where you're curious, you're willing to ask questions, you're diligent, you take the time to make those decisions, and then as you do that, you may come out and hear some things you don't want to hear. There may be some truths that you weren't expecting, but actually true, that you have to be honest enough to make the decision based off of. Hey, let me give you a funny story. So this past week, me and my wife, I've got some weddings coming up, and I realized, I'm like, I need to get a new suit, right? I need to get a new suit. So I go, and me, you know, if you get to know me, I wear a suit about 5-6 times a year, maybe a little more. I'll wear, even sometimes at funerals, I just wear a coat and jeans. But there's weddings, and I got to wear a suit. I get a black suit. I call it my Marion suit, right? I get a black suit because black suits go with everything. Go with weddings, funerals, you name it. I got to get this suit, right? I go to the suit store. We got to get the suit, and we go to the modern fit section, right? First off, I go in. The guy's like, well, you know, he measures me, and I'm like, I already know, man. I'm a 48 short. You know, it's hard to find, you know, I'm like a dwarf from Lord of the Rings. I'm short and wide, right? And so he's like, well, you know, that's actually one size that sometimes we have to order. I'm like, great, man. I feel like the husky kid, right? We go in here and we're trying stuff on. I'm over in the modern fit because, you know, I want the modern fit, man. You know, the style is sleek. You know, I want to look like the GQ model. Like the guy who was selling my suit, shout out to him, awesome guy. He tells me he was being diligent with me. He's like, listen, man, I don't get a commission. So I want to help you get in the best fit so you look good. He's helped me try stuff on. And he was like, you know, dapper goals. This dude was dressed to the nines, man, right? But trying this suit on in modern fit, and he's like, I just don't like how that's fitting on you. It's a little snug here, and the way the shoulder is a little puffy. He looks at me and goes, listen, I'm going to go over here. I think we've got one that will look better on you in our executive fit, right? Executive fit. And he walks over, and I look at my wife, Shauna, and I go, hey, what's executive fit? She looks at me, she goes, that's called old man suit. That's old man suit, because you're growing like an old man in places. And I'm like, oh, my Lord, man, some dudes give me an old man, fat man suit. That's what's going on here, right? But I had to hear some things I didn't want to hear if I wanted, because I'm making an investment in this suit. If it's going to fit me right. And he comes over and he puts the coat on, and sure enough, man, the executive cut fit this way better than the slim modern fit, okay? So I'm like, well, man, let's fire this up. Let's get me this executive suit. Sometimes you have to be willing, as you're asking the right questions, to hear things that you don't want to hear. You got to hear the hard stuff. But it's okay, because it's in hearing the hard stuff and doing the diligence based on your curiosity that you gain insight. And as you gain more insight, you make better decisions and you have fewer regrets. Now, we're going to work off of a pattern as we look at these 5 questions over the next few weeks. It's a pattern. It's not original to me. It's original to Andy. And this is how it's going to work. Here's how you apply this. It's a framework, and I want to go ahead and give you that framework. And it's this. You ask the questions, you answer honestly, and then you act. It's pretty simple, and this works even if you're not a Christian and you're not, you know, fully following Christ with your life. You can at least say, hey, man, that's a pattern for me to make decisions. Ask the right questions, answer honestly. We're going to talk about that next week. And then you have to act on it. And that's a good framework. And here's the thing. I want you to think about this as we're preparing. The whole point of today is I want to challenge you to get yourself in the position to ask better questions. And if you're going to ask better questions, there's, like I said, two things you have to cultivate: curiosity and diligence. If you're going to ask the question, you got to be curious. If you're going to be answer honestly, you got to take the time to be diligent. And then that's when you have to act. And so I want to challenge you. I want to ask you this question. How curious are you? How open and willing are you to asking yourself even hard questions? And you understand, man, your ability to ask those questions is going to affect your ability to make decisions that determine the direction and quality of your life. So maybe what you need to do is you need to take an honest evaluation. We all need to do this from time to time to say, am I willing to ask hard questions? And then, am I patient enough? Am I willing enough to take the time to really think through and listen, even if it's a hard answer? Because sometimes, man, your willingness to do that can make all the difference. Now, as we think about that, right, I know for some of us, we hear that, and you may be in a position in your life where you're like, dude, where I'm at in life right now is because I've made some really hard decisions that I really regret. And on the backside of it, I would say I wish I'd asked more questions. Because here's the thing. Your decisions, private decisions, have public outcomes. And sometimes the decisions you and I make, they don't just affect us. They affect the people around us. You may be listening to say, yeah, I'm where I'm at right now because someone in my sphere, in my life, made a decision that affects not only themselves, but it affected me. And you may feel like that you're in a place that's hopeless because you're like, I'm just here and I've made maybe a mess. Well, that's the beautiful thing about Jesus, man. There's always hope when we follow him. Our ability to gain insight comes even more fully through a relationship with him. God gives us not just second chances, but third, fourth, fifth, and on chances. You are never too far gone. You've never went so far in the regrets you have that the Lord, that Jesus can't help you make a shift. And that's the hope I want to give you today. If that's where you find yourself, is that you have some real hardcore regrets. Listen, it doesn't mean that where you're at today doesn't mean you stay there. Because you can learn to ask the questions that help you make the decisions to set you on a different course, a different path. A path where later and in the future, you may have had regrets before, but you don't have to have as many regrets then. So look, I want to encourage you to do that. I want to encourage you to hang with me. Come in the next couple of weeks and just lean in and learn these questions. But before you do that, you got to set yourself on the ground and say, okay, I'm willing to ask the questions. I'm willing to be curious. And I'm willing to give the time, to take the time to be patient enough to work through what I need to work through. And I'm willing to even hear sometimes things I don't want to hear. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Let's pray, guys. Father, as we just think about these Proverbs that we've heard today, God, may we be childlike, not childish, but childlike in the sense that we don't lose a sense of awe and wonder and the ability to ask lots of questions. Because we know in being curious, we gain insight, and that helps us to make better decisions. God, the prayer I want to pray right now, though, is because, God, I just feel like there's, including myself sometimes, God, we all have regret. And may we understand we don't have to live in that regret, that we can move out of that, and that we can take the future, and we can indeed, as Andy says, make better decisions and have fewer regrets. We're not going to get rid of all regret. That's part of the human experience. But we can grow, and we can walk, and we can go in directions that are better. And we understand, Lord, that out of that, ultimately it's because you want the best for our life. And as we're going to see, as we go through this material, when we ask questions and we make decisions that line up with your plan for our life, things just seem to work out better. So God, give us, just prepare us for that. Help us to get ready for that. And help us to be curious and diligent. In Jesus' name, amen.
You know I had my doubts. I thought the fire went out, but the old winds are blowing, blowing again. You know I lost my way. I'm sure I will again someday. There's a whisper calling, calling again. This is the sound of a child coming home. Hallelujah. This is the song of a welcome prodigal. Hallelujah. I thought I was too far gone, but you always leave the light on. Praise God, praise God, praise God. I'm coming home. Thought I was miles away. Somehow my vision changed. You've been with me all along. Took me a long, long time to finally realize that you never, ever, ever shut the door. This is the sound of a child coming home. Hallelujah. This is the song of a welcome prodigal. Hallelujah. I thought I was too far gone, but you always leave the light on. Praise God, praise God, praise God. For those who are afraid to come, there is no fear in perfect love. For those who don't know where to start, He always meets us where we are. For those with just a little faith is all it takes. He's calling, He's calling. If you got caught up in religion's game, then let Him show you the real thing. For the skeptic still in search of truth, He'll bring that child out of you. Oh, what are you still waiting for? Standing at an open door. He's calling, He's calling. This is the sound of a child coming home. Hallelujah. This is the song of a welcome prodigal. Hallelujah. This is the sound of a child coming home. Hallelujah. This is the song of a welcome prodigal. Hallelujah. I thought I was too far gone, but you always leave the light on. Praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God. I'm coming home.
Man, that's one of my favorite songs. I love that song, and I hope it's been impactful for you today. Thanks for hanging out with us here at Pinnacle Online. It was a great message as we really begin to think about the decisions that we make and how they determine the direction of our life. So I hope you'll come back next week for week 2. And hey, if you would like to take this series a little bit further and learn with other people how you can make better decisions with fewer regrets, I encourage you to get connected in a new growth group that are starting this week here at Pinnacle Church. We have some that meet in person, we have some that meet online, and if you would like to get connected with another group of people to learn how you can make better decisions with fewer regrets, you can sign up online at pinnacle.church under next steps, click growth groups, and you can sign up for a group right there. Hey, we'll hope you join us again next week. We'll see you then.